Hi everyone, I'm Ravi Handa and welcome to another episode of Desi Fire podcast. Today we are going to talk about should you invest in NPS or not. But before we actually get to that, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, we first need to understand that what exactly NPS is. So there are three key things in NPS. One, it is an instrument that helps you save tax. Second, it is an instrument that helps you invest in both equity and debt. And third, it is essentially a tool for retirement. These are the broad things that you need to know about NPS. Now, how exactly does it save tax? Well, there are multiple things that it does. The first one being you can save up to 1.5 lakh rupees under ATC. Now, there is PPF which is available in ATC, there is ELSS mutual funds which are available in ATC. So this might not be a very strong reason to invest in NPS, but it's there as an option. The other thing is over and above that 1.5 lakh rupees, the 50k, extra 50k that is allowed, that is only for NPS. So this extra 50k under 80CCD1B is not available in any other instrument. And this is there in the old regime. Once again, you can use it, you can not use it. It's not a very strong reason to use NPS because what is 50k a year going to do for your retirement? It's a trivial amount. But then comes the most important part of tax saving in NPS, which is that you can invest up to 10% of your salary and that becomes tax free. So when I talk about salary, I'm talking about basic plus DA. And this is available only if you are an employee and your employer agrees to contribute to NPS. This is where the big decision making comes in, that whether you should invest in NPS or not. Whether you are doing this ATC or not doesn't really make that much of a difference because there are other instruments. 50k, not really a significant enough amount, but 10% of salary becomes a significant amount for you to consider, think about it, and then take a decision. I'm not saying that you should invest in NPS. I'm not saying that you should not invest. I'm saying if you are an employee, because of this humongous tax saving that you can do on 10% of your salary, you should really consider it. Especially if you are someone who's in the 30% tax bracket. We will look at the numbers shortly. Another tax benefit is that whatever amount of money that you put in NPS, when you take it out, you don't have to pay any capital gains tax. Suppose you buy an equity mutual fund, there you will have to pay a long-term capital gain tax. No such thing like that in NPS. There is no income tax as well. For example, if you invest in an FD, whatever returns you make from it, they get added to your income and then you need to pay income tax on it. Same as your slab rate. Once again, nothing like that exists in NPS. Whatever money you give, that money grows to another value and you get out that value. There are no taxes that you have to pay when you take that money out. And that is, again, a huge advantage in terms of tax for NPS. Then comes the other part that you can actually allocate into equity. Most of the other retirement schemes that the government runs, such as the PPF or the EPF or senior citizen savings schemes and all of that, none of them have a equity component. This has an equity component and it gives you a bunch of options. My favorite one is the one for active choice, in which you can invest up to 75% in equity. As you age, so till 50 years of age, you can put in 75%, 51, it goes to 72.5, keeps on reducing until 60 years of age, it becomes 50%. This is the one that I use. This is the one that I recommend as well. There are other options also. One is this one, which is, I think this is the aggressive auto choice. In this, up to 35 years, class E is equity, 75% goes in equity. then 71, then 67. So with every year, 4 percentage points are reducing. If you go further ahead, after 45, the reduction is of 3%. So 35, 32, 29, 26, and so on. If you go beyond 50, then it becomes 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, and 15. It keeps on reducing by 1. So as in the previous case, it was reducing by 2.5% every year after 50. In the auto choice aggressive mode, it reduces first by 4%, then by 3%, and then by 1%. The least percentage here is 15, whereas the least percentage here was 50. So as you can see, this has the best possible equity allocation. What is class C and class G? C is corporate bonds and G is government bonds. Broadly the same, you can say like a bank FD and some of the debt funds which are there, they invest in corporate bonds. So these are both fixed income instruments. These are both debt related instruments. Typically, you can invest the sort of returns that you would get in an FD from the government securities, and a percentage more than that is what you can expect in the corporate bonds, so to say. This was the auto choice aggressive mode. There is another option which is auto choice moderate mode. In the moderate one, the percentage goes from 50 to 10 over a long period, and I think it always reduces by 2% every year, 50, 48, 46, and so on. There is another one which is auto choice conservative. I think if you are being that conservative, then it doesn't make much sense to go in for a product like NPS. I would not really recommend that. Personally, I would suggest that you have the active choice one, and if you don't, at least go in for the aggressive one here. So as I said, NPS allows you to invest in equity and debt. This is the split of that. The third part of it, which is that it is essentially a retirement instrument. A lot of people forget that about NPS. And because it is a retirement instrument, the money is not really liquid. Your money remains locked till the age of 60. Technically, you can continue till 75 if you want to, but it remains locked in till 60. Now, is that a benefit or is that a problem? Some people see it as a benefit because it protects you from making a mistake. Otherwise, if you actually have that cash, if you have liquid money, you might make some wrong decisions, you might take the money out, you might try to time the market. There are plenty of things that can go wrong when the control is with you. On the other hand, there are a lot of people who see this thing as a problem as well. Boss, I want control of what I do with my money. Who are you to decide how much to put in equity, how much to put in debt? I will take all those decisions myself. So those people see it as a problem. I don't know which category you belong to, take a call, but you need to be aware that liquidity is not there in NPS as a product till the age of 60. Another thing which is there, because it is a retirement product, it is not an pure investment product, the government forces you, yes, forces you to buy an annuity of 40% of the corpus. Whatever amount you invested doesn't matter, but at the age of 60, when you are taking that money out, the government will force you to buy annuity with 40% of the amount. What is annuity? A lot of people may be hearing the term for the first time because, annuity is an incredibly boring product. Annuity is something that you give money to someone and he will pay you a fixed monthly amount. That's broadly what annuity is. Now, is it a good idea or a bad idea? Once again, depends on how you look at it. Why is it a good idea? Because after the age of 60, you will need some sort of guaranteed cash flows. You can create those cash flows with other means, but you will need those. And annuity as a product provides you that guaranteed cash flows till you die. When you buy an annuity, if the company tells you that you will get 6,000 rupees per month, then you will get 6,000 rupees per month till you die. But is it a good idea? Well, the fact that it generates cash flows is a huge positive, but it has two big problems. One, the returns that you get are suboptimal. There aren't that many great annuity products which are available. And fundamentally, returns are always going to be bad in an annuity type of product for the simple reason neither the company knows how long you are going to live nor you know how you are going to live. Neither the company knows what the interest rates are going to be 20 years, 30 years from now, nor do you know what it is going to be. So, who is going to decide? Company is going to decide, and company is going to decide in their own favor. And that is why the returns that you get are suboptimal on annuity products. The other problem, as with liquidity, this also restricts your freedom. Who are you to tell me where I should put my money? It is my money, right? Then how are you deciding 40% of your corpus you have to buy this particular product? I mean, you are the government, so you do anything or what? So that becomes a problem for some people. I'm not saying it's a problem for me or how we tackle this problem or anything like that, but people do not like it. And that is a problem, I believe, for a large number of people who don't really like NPS. The biggest reason they don't like is because they're forced to buy annuity with 40% of the corpus. Now, what exactly is the returns that you get on annuity? Now, this is an article that I was reading, I think it was by Preeti Kulkarni, if I'm not wrong, for Money Control, where they have figured out what is the rate of return that you are getting in annuity. Annuities are of different types. These are the 5 types which are offered, I believe, by SBI. So, very, very reliable annuity provider. Lifetime annuity without return of capital. So that means you give them the money. So you give them 10 lakh rupees and they will pay you 6,526 rupees till you die. It's possible that you die in 5 years. It's possible that you die in 40 years. We don't know. But this is what they are providing. On the other hand, annuity for pensioner and spouse, which is you and your spouse, without return of capital. They will not give you back the capital. I, frankly speaking, would never go in for these sort of options without any return of capital. I want my capital to be returned back. So if I'm giving you 10 lakh rupees, you give me whatever interest you believe is appropriate till I die. And once I'm dead, give that money to my wife, give that money to my children. You don't get to keep that money. What if I die at 65? Then my children and people who were dependent on me, they were, miss out on their inheritance. So I would never go in for these two. Probably these are the ones which you should go in for, in which what happens is whatever money you give to SBI will give you the exact same amount back. Well, not you. Once you die, it will give your children or your wife that amount back. So these are the 3 that you should consider, and these 3 come at roughly an XIRR of 6.4 or 6.5%, which is low. It's much lower than what even an FD gets you, and that is why people don't like it. But the idea is that FD rates are very high right now. If you're 60 right now and you're going to live till 90, for the next 30 years, the interest rates are going to be in a long-term downtrend for any developing or even a developed economy. And that is why these rates don't look that good. But the rates are what the rates are. Annuity is thrust on you, you have to take it. It's not an option. The question is, should you even go for NPS in that case or not? And that is why it is very important to compare, considering all of these factors, the taxation, the annuity, the liquidity, of whether you should put money in NPS or you should try and do it yourself. Let's have a look at that. So some of the assumptions that I have made are that the penalty that I'm going to impose on NPS for liquidity, there should be a penalty. Boss, you are keeping my money locked. So there should be a penalty in this particular product if it keeps my money locked versus the other product where the money is always available. I believe anywhere from a 0 to 2%, that's 2% on the final amount, is more or less fair, because that's essentially the difference that comes in. I personally would not really put in even 2% on that, because I'm okay with some of my money being locked. It's not all my retirement corpus. So I think a 2% penalty for liquidity might just be fair, or even a 0%. Your call. I made a calculator. In that calculator, you can input your values. These are just suggestions. The penalty for annuity is could be anywhere from 0 to 20%. I have no logic behind these numbers, but these are just some suggestions that I have when you input the values in the calculator, that if you believe liquidity is a problem, put a penalty on it and then compare. If you believe annuity is a problem, put a penalty on it and then compare. Then a lot of people believe that you can, get outperformance when you invest yourself. How do you get your outperformance? A is asset allocation. If you remember in NPS, the upper limit of equity is there. In some cases it is 75%, in some cases it is 15% and all of that. When you are doing it yourself, you can put 100% in equity. There is no restriction. Your money, your wish. That might give you an advantage, because saving for retirement is a long-term investment, and for your long-term money should essentially go into equities. The other way people can outperform is an equity outperformance. Returns of the equity part of the NPS are broadly going to be in line with index funds, or rather the Nifty 50 to be precise. So whatever the Nifty 50 gives, that's broadly what you can expect from the NPS equity department. However, some people believe, I don't believe that, I don't think I can do that, but some people believe that they can beat the index. And they can beat the index over and over and over again every year with a margin. Well, if you are that brilliant that you can beat the index consistently, I believe you should be a fund manager. But, for whatever reason, if you believe that you can do that, in the calculator, I have put in these values. I have considered an equity outperformance of somewhere from 0 to 3%. Then comes the debt outperformance part. NPS will put in very, very safe debt, government bonds, etc. Maybe you can invest in FDs of, slightly less bigger banks and cooperative banks, etc. and maybe make a percentage point extra on that. All that is possible. You do it, you don't do it, you are able to do it, you are unable to do it. Put in your values in the calculator. I'm just explaining how my calculator is going to work. Now, for the assumptions that I've taken the age as 40 years, investments as 2 lakh rupees per year. Returns on equity I have assumed as 12%. Returns on debt I have assumed as 6%. The taxes, I have assumed that the person who is doing these calculations is in the 30% tax bracket. LTCG on equity, that is long-term capital gain, is at 10%. The long-term capital gain on debt is at 30%. I have assumed in these calculations, the calculations that I am going to show whether NPS is a better idea or do it yourself is a better idea. In those, I have assumed the liquidity penalty to be 1%, annuity penalty to be 20%. Debt outperformance I have assumed as 0, and the exposure in NPS I have assumed as 60%. Once again, in the calculator, the link is there in the description for the calculator. You can put in whatever values you want. It's just for the PPT, these are the values that I have assumed to figure out who wins. So, if I keep the do-it-yourself equity exposure at 60%, which is the value that I have for my NPS, and then I do the equity outperformance as 0%, 1%, 2%, 3% or 4%, NPS typically wins. NPS wins in the 0%, 1%, 2% by a margin of 46%, 26% and 8%. And to be really honest, I do believe even if outperforming the index is going to be really, really difficult, but let's say you do that, by how much? Maybe by 1%, maybe by 2%. If you are actually able to outperform the index by more than 2% year after year, over a period of 20 years, 30 years, you should be running a fund. So that's precisely why I do believe that with these considerations, if you keep the equity exposure at 60%, NPS is coming out as a very, very clear winner. If you believe you can get to 3%, 4% outperformance, then DIY becomes the winner. The other case being where you increase the equity exposure. Now, one thinking is that why should I keep my equity exposure at only 60% or 75% or 50%, whatever NPS limits it as? My money, my wish, I will have a higher percentage in equity. So what happens when you increase your equity percentage to 60, to 70, to 80, to 90, to 100? Well, I have assumed that there is no equity outperformance and you are getting more or less the index returns only. In all of these cases, once again, NPS wins. So, in all likelihood, you will probably be in the 70 to 90% bracket, and NPS is the clear winner there with 33%, 22% and a 13% margin. So does that mean that NPS always wins? And this entire video could have been finished in 1 minute saying that NPS wins and you should just get the NPS? No. These are some of the cases which I believe are realistic, practical, and where do it yourself is going to win. What I've assumed is if you have an equity exposure of a 90% or 100%, since it is your retirement money, you can have it at 90, 100, you can have it at 80, 90, 100. That's perfectly valid, perfectly possible. And with this, if you are able to get just 1% above index or 2% above index, which is very much possible, a lot of mutual funds are able to do it. And if you are lucky enough to be invested in that sort of a fund which consistently beats the index by 1-2%, in that case, yes, do it yourself is for you, and you can actually do a very good job from anywhere from a margin of 5% to 36%. So if you have 100% in equity and you have an outperformance of 2%, do it yourself would beat NPS by 36%. Let us have a look at the Excel sheet that I used to get out all this data and all this table. The link to this Excel sheet is shared in the video. All you need to do is put in whatever values you like. So age 40, investment 2 lakh, equity 12%, 6%. All of this is editable. So let's say I make the liquidity penalty as 2% and I increase the equity exposure as 100%. And I put the outperformance as 1%. You can see in this particular case, with this sort of assumptions, the winner is going to be do it yourself by a 10% margin. So please do try out this particular sheet. For those of you who are wondering what are the calculations that I used in this, let me just share the formulas that I have used. So what I've done is for NPS equity, B3 was my investment into B12. How much is my equity exposure? So out of 2 lakh, 60% is 1,20,000 is the equity exposure. The returns are 1 plus B4. So that is 1 plus 12% every year is the return. And for how long? At 60, I'm assuming the game is over and my current age is 40. So 12% returns for a period of 20 years. That's how this formula comes in. Very similarly, the debt formula, everything is more or less the same. B3 is the initial investment. 1 minus B12 gives me the portion for debt. 1 plus B5 gives me the returns for debt. and 60 minus B2, 60 minus my current age, tells me for how long this would compound. Liquidity penalty. So liquidity penalty is 2% or the value in B9 into the total amount, because your total amount was locked. The annuity penalty that I have kept as 10% here, so the formula for that is B10 into 0.4. I've done that 0.4 because you have to purchase annuity with only 40% of the amount, and E2 plus E3, that's the total NPS equity plus debt. Very similarly, for the do-it-yourself equity, what is happening in that case? B3, my investment amount, into B15, how much is my equity exposure, which is 100% here, into 1 minus B6. Now this is where I'm taking out the tax. So B6, 30% is the tax. You take out that 30%, so 1 minus B6, returns B4, which is the equity return, plus B16, which is the outperformance that I'm expecting. And once again, 60 minus B2 gives me the period for which it is there. The formula for DIY do-it-yourself debt, very similarly, investment amount 1 minus B15, so that means you remove the equity part, 1 minus B6, that means you remove the taxation part, 1 plus B5 plus B11, B5 is the debt return, B11 is the debt outperformance, and 60 minus B2 is the period for it. Then DIY equity post-tax. How do I remove taxes from it? Well, from the original amount, that is the total amount that is here, I remove the LTCG. How much is the LTCG? LTCG rate is given to me on equity here as B7. What is my capital gain? Final amount minus the original amount. The original amount was derived from this. So this is my capital gain. Very similarly, capital gains are applicable on debt also. The formula is given here. You add up all of these values, the DIY equity post-tax and DIY equity debt post-tax, you get the total DIY amount. For NPS, it is equity plus debt. From that, you need to remove the liquidity penalty, you need to remove the annuity penalty, and that gives you this E2 plus E3 minus E4 minus E5 gives you the total NPS amount. Once you get the total NPS amount and the total DIY amount, your winner is decided. Whoever is bigger, E7 or G7, that gives me the winner, and it also gives me the margin of victory. So that's how I made this calculator. Please try out this calculator. Hopefully now, with the help of this video where we talked about the features of the NPS, how to figure out which one is better for you, you will be able to make a more informed decision. I hope now you will be able to make a much more informed decision, and I also hope that you like and subscribe my channel. Thank you.